The morning light filtered through the stained glass windows of Westminster Abbey, casting colourful shadows across the ancient stone floor, where kings had been crowned for nearly 1,000 years. In just a few hours, 2 generations of the British royal family would stand together in one of the most sacred and secretive ceremonies the monarchy still observes: the anniversary of the Order of the Bath. King Charles III adjusted his ceremonial robes, the weight of 6 centuries of tradition pressing down upon his shoulders like the crown itself. Beside him, Prince William studied the ancient ritual text, knowing that one day he too would bear the responsibility of preserving these sacred traditions that bind the monarchy to the very soul of Britain. What began as a medieval ritual of purification before knighthood had evolved into something far more profound, a ceremony that would reveal the deepest bonds between father and son, the unbreakable chains of duty that connect past to future, and the price of wearing the crown in an age when tradition battles modernity at every turn. As the abbey bells began to toll, neither man could have imagined how this ancient ceremony would become a turning point in their relationship, a moment when the weight of kingship would shift from one generation to the next in ways that would reshape the very future of the British monarchy. The Order of the Bath was about to reveal its greatest secret: that some bonds are stronger than blood, and some duties are heavier than any crown. The first rays of dawn crept across the manicured gardens of Buckingham Palace, as King Charles III stood at his private study window, watching the city slowly awaken. London stretched before him like a living tapestry, millions of his subjects beginning another ordinary day, unaware that their sovereign was preparing for one of the most extraordinary ceremonies in the royal calendar. Charles turned away from the window and walked to his mahogany desk, where a leather-bound folder waited. Inside were the sacred protocols for the anniversary of the Order of the Bath, ceremonies that had been performed by his ancestors since 1725. The pages, yellowed with age and handled by countless royal hands before his, contained secrets that only a handful of people in the world were privileged to know. The Order of the Bath was no ordinary honour. Unlike the more familiar Order of the Garter or the Order of the Thistle, the Bath carried with it rituals that reached back to the very foundations of chivalry itself. Knights of the Bath underwent a literal baptism, a spiritual cleansing that prepared them not just for military service, but for a life dedicated to something greater than themselves. As Charles read through the morning schedule, his mind wandered to his son William. The Prince of Wales had been formally inducted into the Order of the Bath years earlier, but this would be the first time he would participate as heir apparent in the anniversary ceremony. The weight of that responsibility was not lost on Charles, who remembered his own first participation in the ritual decades earlier, when his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, had guided him through the ancient protocols. The sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor outside his study drew Charles from his thoughts. His private secretary, Sir Clive Alderton, appeared in the doorway with his usual punctual precision. Behind him walked Prince William, already dressed in the mourning coat that would later be replaced by far more elaborate ceremonial robes. "Good morning, Your Majesty," William said, offering a slight bow that was both formal and familial. The relationship between the two men had evolved considerably since Charles had ascended to the throne. What had once been the sometimes strained dynamic between an eager son and a patient but distant father had transformed into something deeper and more complex, a partnership forged by shared duty and mutual respect. "William," Charles nodded, gesturing toward the chair across from his desk. "I trust you've reviewed the ceremonial requirements?" William settled into the chair, his posture straight and attentive. "I have, sir. Though I confess some of the older Latin passages remain challenging. The medieval pronunciations are quite different from what one learns in school." Charles smiled slightly, remembering his own struggles with the ancient language of ceremony. "Your grandmother once told me that the Latin isn't meant to be perfect. It's the intention behind the words that matters, the connection to those who spoke them before us. When you speak those words today, you're joining your voice to centuries of knights and kings who understood the weight of service." The conversation was interrupted by another knock at the door. This time it was Lady Susan Hussey, one of the Queen's former ladies-in-waiting, who had remained to assist with ceremonial protocols. She carried with her a silver tray bearing 2 small velvet boxes. "Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness," she said with a curtsy. "The ceremonial badges for today's service." Charles opened the first box to reveal his own badge of the order, the elaborate star and ribbon that marked him as sovereign of the order. The second box contained William's badge, equally ornate but bearing the subtle differences that marked his position as heir. These were not mere decorations, but symbols of a covenant between the crown and those who served it. As Lady Susan withdrew, Charles stood and walked to a portrait hanging on the far wall of his study. It showed his great-great-grandfather, King Edward VII, in the full regalia of the Order of the Bath. Edward had been known for his modernization of many royal ceremonies, but he had insisted on maintaining the ancient traditions of the Bath in their purest form. "Do you know why your great-great-great-grandfather was so insistent about preserving these rituals?" Charles asked, not turning from the portrait. William joined his father before the painting, studying the formal pose of the long-dead king. He understood that some traditions are worth preserving not because they're convenient, but because they connect us to something larger than ourselves? Precisely, Charles nodded. The Order of the Bath isn't about the pomp or the ceremony. It's about the commitment to serve something greater than personal ambition. Every knight who enters the order undergoes the same ritual cleansing, the same vows, the same dedication to duty, from the humblest soldier to the highest prince. The morning continued with a series of meetings and briefings. Sir Clive presented the list of new knights who would be honoured during the ceremony, men and women from across the Commonwealth who had distinguished themselves in military service, public service, or exceptional contribution to their communities. Each name represented a story of sacrifice, dedication, and service that went far beyond personal gain. Among the honorees was Colonel Sarah Mitchell, a military engineer who had led humanitarian efforts in war-torn regions around the world. There was also Dr. Kwame Asante, a physician from Ghana who had spent decades fighting infectious diseases in some of the world's most challenging environments. Each had earned their place in the order through actions that embodied the highest ideals of service and sacrifice. As the morning progressed, Charles found himself reflecting on the evolution of the monarchy during his lifetime. He had witnessed his mother navigate decades of social change, maintaining the dignity and relevance of the crown through times when many questioned the very existence of hereditary monarchy. Now, it was his turn to carry that burden, with William beside him as heir and partner. The relationship between father and son had not always been easy. Charles's own relationship with his parents had been formal and distant, shaped by the protocols of a different era. With William, he had tried to create something different, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared understanding of duty, but also on genuine affection and open communication.
"There's something I want to discuss with you," Charles said during a brief break between meetings.
About the future of ceremonies like today's. William looked up from the briefing papers he had been studying. "What concerns you?" "Not concerns, exactly," Charles replied, choosing his words carefully. "But I've been thinking about how we ensure these traditions remain meaningful in a changing world. The Order of the Bath has survived because it has adapted while maintaining its essential character. We need to continue that evolution." They talked for nearly an hour about the challenges facing the monarchy in the 21st century. Public opinion about hereditary privilege was shifting, and there were legitimate questions about the relevance of ancient ceremonies in a modern democracy. But both men agreed that the answer was not to abandon tradition, but to help people understand why these rituals mattered. The Order of the Bath represented something that transcended politics or social class. It honored service, sacrifice, and commitment to ideals larger than personal benefit. In an age of increasing cynicism about public service and civic duty, the order stood as a reminder that some people still chose to dedicate their lives to serving others. As midday approached, it was time for both men to begin their formal preparation for the ceremony. Charles retired to his private apartments to don the elaborate robes and regalia that had been worn by British sovereigns for nearly 3 centuries. The garments were heavy and complex, requiring assistance from his valets to ensure every detail was perfect. William's preparation took place in a separate chamber, where he too was fitted with the ceremonial dress of his rank. The robes were similar to his father's but distinct, marking his position as heir while acknowledging his subordinate role in the ceremony. Every button, every fold of fabric, every piece of jewelry had been specified by protocols written centuries earlier. The weight of the ceremonial dress was more than physical. As Charles adjusted the heavy collar and chains of his office, he felt the presence of every sovereign who had worn similar regalia before him. The crown, the scepter, the robes, all were symbols of a continuity that stretched back through centuries of British history. In the adjacent chamber, William was experiencing similar thoughts. The ceremonial sword at his side had been carried by princes for generations. The badge on his chest connected him to knights who had served the realm in times of war and peace, in triumph and tragedy. He was not just participating in a ceremony, he was taking his place in an unbroken chain of service that would continue long after he was gone. The final preparations complete. Father and son met in the palace's ceremonial corridor. Both wore the full regalia of their respective ranks in the Order of the Bath, creating a visual representation of the continuity between past and future. Charles wore the crimson velvet mantle with its elaborate embroidery of thistles, roses, and shamrocks. William's robes were equally magnificent, though slightly less ornate in keeping with his position as heir. "Ready?" Charles asked, his voice carrying both formality and warmth. "Ready," William replied, understanding that the question referred to far more than the afternoon ceremony. As they walked together toward the waiting cars that would take them to Westminster Abbey, neither man spoke. The weight of tradition, the responsibility of leadership, and the bonds of family all converged in this moment of quiet preparation. The ceremony ahead would be witnessed by only a select few, but its importance stretched far beyond the walls of the ancient abbey. The Order of the Bath was about to welcome new knights into its ranks, continuing a tradition that had survived wars, revolutions, and the rise and fall of empires. And at its heart, 2 generations of the royal family would stand together, united in their commitment to serve something greater than themselves, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. The royal motorcade moved through the streets of London with ceremonial precision, each vehicle positioned according to protocols established over decades of state occasions. King Charles sat in the rear of the lead Rolls-Royce, his ceremonial robes carefully arranged to prevent wrinkling during the journey to Westminster Abbey. Beside him, Prince William gazed out at the crowds that had begun gathering along the route, drawn by curiosity about the rare public glimpse of an ancient ceremony. The morning had transformed into a crisp autumn day, with golden sunlight filtering through the London plane trees that lined the Mall. Charles watched the familiar landmarks pass by. Trafalgar Square with its towering column, the government buildings of Whitehall, the historic churches and monuments that formed the backbone of Britain's capital. Each building held memories of state occasions, royal ceremonies, and moments of national significance that had shaped his understanding of duty and service. "The crowds are larger than expected," William observed, noting the growing number of spectators lining the streets. "Word must have spread about today's ceremony." Charles nodded, unsurprised by the public interest. Despite the Order of the Bath being one of the more obscure royal orders, there was something about the pageantry and tradition of royal ceremonies that continued to captivate people. In an age of rapid change and uncertainty, these ancient rituals provided a sense of continuity and stability that transcended politics and social divisions. The conversation in the car was necessarily limited by the presence of their security detail and staff, but both men were lost in their own thoughts about the significance of the day. For Charles, this anniversary ceremony represented another step in his evolution as sovereign. Unlike his mother, who had inherited the throne at a young age with decades to grow into the role, Charles had become king in his 70s, bringing a lifetime of experience, but also the weight of years of preparation and waiting. The relationship between Charles and William had deepened considerably since the coronation. Where once their interactions had been shaped by the formalities of heir and sovereign, they had evolved into something more collaborative. William's role as Prince of Wales had expanded beyond the traditional ceremonial duties to include active participation in policy discussions and strategic planning for the future of the monarchy. As the motorcade approached Westminster, the Abbey's twin towers came into view, their Gothic spires reaching toward the grey London sky. Westminster Abbey held a special significance for both men. It was here that Charles had been crowned, where William would one day undergo the same ancient ceremony, and where countless generations of British royalty had marked the most important moments of their lives. The Abbey had been carefully prepared for the Order of the Bath ceremony. Unlike the grand public spectacles of coronations or state funerals, this event would be witnessed by only a select group of invited guests. Senior members of the Order, representatives of the military, and officials from across the Commonwealth. The intimacy of the gathering made it no less significant than the larger state occasions, but it created an atmosphere of solemnity and reverence that was uniquely powerful. Inside the Abbey, the ancient stones seemed to vibrate with the weight of history. The chapter house, where the ceremony would take place, had been the meeting place of medieval parliaments and the site of countless royal councils. The room's octagonal shape and soaring ceiling created an atmosphere that was both intimate and awe-inspiring, perfect for the sacred rituals of the order. As their car drew to a stop outside the Abbey's main entrance, Charles could see the gathered dignitaries waiting to receive them. The Dean of Westminster stood at the entrance, flanked by the Abbey's clergy and the senior officers of the Order of the Bath. Each figure wore the ceremonial dress appropriate to their rank and role, creating a tableau that could have been lifted from a medieval manuscript. The moment of arrival was choreographed with military precision. The car doors opened simultaneously, and both Charles and William emerged into the crisp afternoon air. The crowd of onlookers pressed against the barriers erupted in cheers and applause, a sound that echoed off the Abbey's ancient walls and mixed with the tolling of the great bells overhead. Charles paused for a moment, acknowledging the crowd with a slight wave before turning toward the Abbey entrance. William followed a step behind, maintaining the protocol that governed all public appearances. The weight of their ceremonial robes and the significance of the occasion gave their movements a deliberate, almost ritualistic quality that befitted the ancient ceremony they were about to perform.
Inside the abbey, the atmosphere changed dramatically.
The noise and bustle of the London streets gave way to a profound silence, broken only by the soft footsteps of the royal party on the worn stone floors. The abbey's interior was dimly lit, with candles and carefully placed electric lights creating pools of golden illumination that emphasized the building's Gothic architecture. The procession through the abbey followed a route that had been used for royal ceremonies for over 1,000 years. They passed the coronation chair where every British monarch since Edward I had been crowned, and the tomb of Edward the Confessor, the Saint King who had founded the original abbey. Each step connected them to the unbroken chain of British monarchy that stretched back through centuries of history. The chapter house had been transformed for the ceremony. The ancient chamber, with its intricate stone carvings and medieval tiles, provided a perfect setting for the rituals of the Order of the Bath. Banners representing the various ranks of the order hung from the walls, their heraldic symbols glowing in the candlelight. At the center of the room stood an altar covered with cloth of gold, upon which rested the ceremonial items that would be used in the initiation of new knights. The guests had already taken their places in the carefully arranged seating that surrounded the central space. Among them were senior military officers, distinguished civil servants, and representatives from across the Commonwealth, who had travelled to London specifically for this ceremony. Each had earned their place through exceptional service to the Crown and country, making them witnesses to the continuation of a tradition they themselves embodied. As Charles and William entered the chapter house, the assembled company rose in respectful silence. The moment carried a weight that transcended the formal protocols of royal ceremony. These were not mere spectators, but participants in a living tradition that connected the present moment to centuries of service and sacrifice. The Dean of Westminster stepped forward to greet the royal party, his voice carrying clearly in the acoustic perfection of the medieval chamber. Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, we welcome you to this sacred place for the observance of the anniversary of the Most Honourable Order of the Bath. Charles inclined his head in acknowledgement, then moved to his designated place at the head of the chamber. William took his position slightly behind and to the right, following protocols that had been established when the order was founded nearly 3 centuries earlier. The arrangement emphasized both the continuity of the monarchy and the preparation of the heir for his future role as sovereign of the order. The ceremony began with the reading of the order's charter, a document that had been signed by King George I in 1725, but which drew upon traditions that reached back to the medieval origins of knighthood. The words, spoken in the formal cadences of official royal language, outlined the duties and obligations of membership in the order, emphasizing service, honor, and dedication to the common good. As the charter was read, Charles found his mind wandering to the broader significance of the moment. The Order of the Bath represented something increasingly rare in modern society, an institution that valued service above personal advancement, that honored those who dedicated their lives to causes greater than themselves. In an age of increasing individualism and material ambition, the order stood as a reminder of different values and priorities. The first new knight to be inducted was Colonel Sarah Mitchell, the military engineer whose humanitarian work had earned her recognition throughout the Commonwealth. As she approached the altar, her bearing reflected the quiet confidence of someone who had faced danger and hardship in service to others. Her service record included deployments to conflict zones around the world, where she had led teams building infrastructure and providing relief to civilian populations. The ritual of knighthood that followed was both simple and profound. Colonel Mitchell knelt before the altar as the Dean read the ancient formula of induction. Charles, as sovereign of the order, stepped forward to perform the ceremonial dubbing that would formally admit her to the Brotherhood of Knights. The sword he raised had been used in similar ceremonies for generations, its blade catching the candlelight as it moved through the ritual gestures. "Be thou a good knight and true," Charles intoned, speaking words that had been used in knightly ceremonies since the Middle Ages. The phrase carried with it centuries of meaning, encompassing not just military valor but moral courage, dedication to justice, and willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. As Colonel Mitchell rose and received her insignia, the watching assembly remained in respectful silence. But there was something electric in the air, a sense that they were witnessing not just a ceremony, but the continuation of something essential to the character of the nation. Each new knight represented a link in an unbroken chain of service that stretched back through countless generations of British history. The ceremony continued with the induction of Dr. Kwame Asante, The Ghanaian physician whose work fighting infectious diseases had saved countless lives across Africa and beyond. His presence in the order reflected the modern Commonwealth nature of the institution, which had evolved from its origins as a purely British order to embrace the broader family of nations that shared Britain's constitutional heritage. William watched each part of the ceremony with careful attention, knowing that one day he would stand where his father now stood, performing these same rituals for a new generation of knights. The responsibility was both daunting and inspiring. He was not just learning ceremonial protocols but absorbing the deeper meaning of leadership and service that the order represented. The final element of the anniversary ceremony was the renewal of vows by existing knights of the order. One by one, senior members of the order stepped forward to reaffirm their commitment to the ideals and obligations of knighthood. Their words echoed through the ancient chamber, creating a collective affirmation of shared values and common purpose. As the ceremony drew to its close, Charles felt a profound sense of satisfaction and continuity. The Order of the Bath would survive and flourish, carried forward by new generations of knights who understood that true honor came not from titles or recognition, but from service to others. The ancient traditions had been preserved and renewed, ready to inspire and guide future generations in their own service to crown and country. The ancient chapter house of Westminster Abbey fell into a reverent silence as King Charles stepped forward to begin the most sacred portion of the Order of the Bath ceremony. The candlelight flickered across the Gothic stonework, creating dancing shadows that seemed to breathe life into the carved faces of medieval saints and kings who had witnessed similar ceremonies for centuries. This was the moment when tradition transcended mere pageantry and became something approaching the sacred. Prince William stood at his designated position, watching as his father moved with a deliberate grace that came from years of ceremonial practice. Every gesture Charles made had been refined through decades of royal protocol, but there was something different about this ceremony. The Order of the Bath demanded a level of solemnity and spiritual commitment that went beyond the usual state occasions. Here, in this octagonal chamber where medieval parliaments had met and royal councils had shaped the destiny of nations, the very air seemed thick with the weight of history. The next candidate for knighthood was Admiral Sir James Morrison, a naval officer whose career had spanned conflicts from the Falklands to the Persian Gulf. His weathered face bore the marks of a life spent in service to his country, and his bearing reflected the quiet confidence of a man who had commanded ships in some of the world's most dangerous waters. As he approached the altar, the assembled knights of the order watched with the respectful attention of professionals recognizing excellence in their own field. Charles raised the ceremonial sword, its ancient blade catching the light from the abbey's stained glass windows. The weapon had been used in these ceremonies for over 2 centuries, its steel touched by the hands of kings and knights who had understood the true meaning of service. As the blade moved through the ritual patterns above Admiral Morrison's head, it seemed to trace invisible bonds connecting the present moment to all the ceremonies that had come before. "Rise, Sir James," Charles intoned, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's perfect acoustics. The newly made knight stood, his face reflecting the emotional weight of the moment. This was not merely an honor bestowed by a grateful nation, but admission into a brotherhood that had preserved the highest ideals of service and sacrifice through centuries of change and challenge. William felt the profound significance of witnessing this transformation. He had attended many royal ceremonies, but there was something uniquely moving about the Order of the Bath. Perhaps it was the intimacy of the gathering, or the ancient setting, or the knowledge that these were not politicians or celebrities seeking recognition, but men and women who had genuinely dedicated their lives to serving others. Each new knight represented values that seemed increasingly rare in modern society. The ceremony continued with the induction of Dame Margaret Harrison, a civil servant who had spent her career working in some of the world's most challenging diplomatic environments. Her service record included postings to war zones, refugee camps, and regions devastated by natural disasters. She had negotiated ceasefires, coordinated humanitarian relief efforts, and represented British interests in situations where failure could mean the difference between life and death for thousands of people. As Dame Margaret knelt before the altar, Charles reflected on the evolution of the Order of the Bath during his lifetime. When he had first participated in these ceremonies as a young prince, the ranks were dominated by military officers and senior civil servants, almost exclusively male and British. The order had evolved to reflect the changing nature of service itself, welcoming women, Commonwealth citizens, and individuals from fields as diverse as medicine, education, and humanitarian work.
The transformation reflected broader changes in British society and the Commonwealth, but it also demonstrated the enduring relevance of the ideals that the order represented.
Service, honor, and dedication to the common good were not concepts limited by gender, nationality, or profession. They were universal values that could inspire and guide people from all walks of life. The ritual of dubbing Dame Margaret followed the same ancient formula, but Charles spoke the words with renewed emphasis, understanding that he was not just honoring an individual, but celebrating the principle that true nobility came from service rather than birth. The Order of the Bath had always been a meritocracy, recognizing achievement and dedication rather than inherited privilege. As the ceremony progressed, William found himself thinking about the future of the monarchy and his own role as heir. The challenges facing the institution were significant, questions about relevance, cost, and democratic accountability in an age of increasing egalitarianism. But ceremonies like this one reminded him that the monarchy's true strength lay not in its privileges but in its ability to embody and preserve values that transcended political fashions and social changes. The next phase of the ceremony involved the renewal of vows by existing members of the order. One by one, senior knights stepped forward to reaffirm their commitment to the principles of the order. The words they spoke were not mere formalities but genuine expressions of continued dedication to service and sacrifice. Field Marshal Lord Richards, a veteran of conflicts in Northern Ireland, the Balkans and Afghanistan, spoke for many when he declared, "I renew my oath to serve with honor, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, and to place duty before personal advantage." His words carried the authority of someone who had faced the ultimate test of leadership, commanding troops in combat while maintaining the highest standards of professional conduct and moral integrity. The collective renewal of vows created a moment of extraordinary unity and purpose. Here were men and women who had chosen careers dedicated to public service, who had faced danger and hardship in the service of others, and who continued to believe in ideals that many in contemporary society might consider outdated or naive. Their presence in this ancient chamber was a testament to the enduring power of traditional values. Charles looked around the assembled company and felt a deep sense of pride and satisfaction. These were not ceremonial knights seeking social advancement, but genuine servants of the crown and country who had earned their honors through extraordinary dedication and achievement. Their presence validated the continued relevance of the monarchy as an institution that could recognize and celebrate the highest forms of human service. The ceremony's climax came with the presentation of the Order's banner, a magnificent piece of heraldic art that bore the symbols and mottos of the ancient chivalric tradition. The banner had been blessed by archbishops, carried into battle by knights, and preserved through centuries of war and peace. As it was unfurled above the altar, the assembled company rose in respectful acknowledgement of what it represented. William stepped forward to assist with the banner ceremony, his role carefully defined by protocols that had been refined over generations. As he helped to position the ceremonial standard, he felt the physical weight of the fabric and the metaphorical weight of the tradition it embodied. One day, he would be responsible for preserving and passing on this legacy to his own heir, ensuring that the values of service and sacrifice continued to inspire future generations. The ceremony included readings from historical documents that traced the evolution of the order from its medieval origins to its modern form. The text spoke of knights who had served in the Crusades, defended England against invasion, explored unknown continents, and built the infrastructure of empire. But they also celebrated more recent heroes: peacekeepers, humanitarian workers, medical researchers, and educators who had served the cause of human dignity and progress. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a researcher who had dedicated her career to developing treatments for tropical diseases that primarily affected the world's poorest populations, stepped forward to receive her honor. Her work had been conducted far from the spotlight of public attention, in remote laboratories and field stations where she had risked her own health to advance medical knowledge that would save countless lives. As Charles performed the ceremony of knighthood for Dr. Colin Chen, he reflected on how the definition of heroism had evolved during his lifetime. The Knights of the Order of the Bath no longer rode into battle with sword and lance, but they still faced dangers and challenges that required the same courage and dedication that had inspired the original knights of medieval legend. The modern Knights of the Order fought different battles against disease, poverty, ignorance, and injustice. Their weapons were knowledge, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to serving others. In many ways, their service required even greater courage than that of their medieval predecessors, because they served without the promise of glory or recognition, motivated purely by a desire to make the world a better place. The ceremony continued with the induction of Captain David Walsh, a Royal Navy officer who had commanded search and rescue operations that had saved hundreds of lives in some of the world's most treacherous waters. His citation spoke of exceptional bravery and leadership in the service of humanity, but the simple words could not fully capture the reality of what such service entailed. The split-second decisions made in life-or-death situations, the personal risks accepted as the price of saving others, the burden of responsibility for the lives of crew and civilians alike. As Captain Walsh knelt before the altar, William could see in his face the same qualities that had marked great servants of the Crown throughout history: humility, determination, and an unshakable commitment to duty. These were not qualities that could be taught or commanded, but they were the essential characteristics that distinguished true knights from mere recipients of honours. The ceremony reached its emotional peak with the collective recitation of the Order's motto, Tria Juncta in Uno, 3 joined in 1. The Latin phrase referred to the 3 classes of the Order, but it had come to symbolize the unity of purpose that bound all knights together, regardless of their background, profession, or nationality. As the voices of the assembled knights echoed through the chapter house, the words seemed to gain power and resonance, becoming both a statement of shared commitment and a prayer for continued strength in service. Charles felt a profound sense of accomplishment as the formal ceremony drew to its close. The Order of the Bath would continue to attract and honor the finest servants of crown and country, preserving ideals that might otherwise be lost in an age of increasing cynicism about public service. The ancient traditions had been faithfully maintained while adapting to embrace the changing nature of service itself. As the final prayers were spoken, and the ceremonial elements returned to their proper places, father and son exchanged a glance that spoke volumes about their shared understanding of what they had witnessed. The Order of the Bath represented everything that was best about the monarchy. Its ability to transcend political divisions, its commitment to recognizing genuine achievement, and its role as guardian of values that defined the character of the nation itself. As the formal ceremony concluded and the newly created knights began to file out of Westminster Abbey's chapter house, King Charles lingered near the altar, his ceremonial robes rustling softly against the ancient stone floor. The candlelight continued to flicker across the Gothic arches, but the atmosphere had shifted from the intense solemnity of the investiture to something more contemplative and reflective. Prince William approached his father, both men still processing the profound emotions stirred by the ancient rituals they had just performed.
"That was extraordinary," William said quietly, his voice carrying a note of genuine awe.
"I've participated in these ceremonies before, but today felt different somehow, more significant." Charles nodded, understanding exactly what his son meant. There had been something particularly moving about this year's anniversary ceremony, perhaps because of the exceptional quality of the individuals being honored, or perhaps because of the moment in history they were experiencing together. The weight of kingship, which Charles had carried for over a year now, seemed to find its proper context in ceremonies like this. One, the Dean of Westminster approached them with the practiced discretion of someone accustomed to giving members of the royal family space for private reflection while remaining available for any assistance they might need. The Abbey staff had begun the careful process of returning the chapter house to its normal state, removing the ceremonial furnishings and banners with the same reverence they had shown in preparing for the ceremony. "The reception for the new knights is prepared in Jerusalem Chamber," the Dean informed them gently, "though I understand if your Majesty wishes a few more moments here." Charles appreciated the Dean's sensitivity to the emotional aftermath of such ceremonies. Jerusalem Chamber, with its medieval tapestries and historic associations, would provide the perfect setting for the more informal gathering that always followed the formal investiture. It was there that the newly created knights could meet privately with members of the royal family, sharing stories and reflections that would never find their way into official records, but which formed the human heart of these ancient institutions. As they walked through the Abbey's corridors towards Jerusalem Chamber, Charles found himself thinking about the evolution of his relationship with William. The pressures of kingship had brought them closer together in ways he had not anticipated. Where once their conversations had been shaped by the formal boundaries between heir and monarch, they had developed a more collaborative partnership based on mutual respect and shared understanding of their duties. "I've been thinking about something you mentioned earlier," William said as they paused before a portrait of King Henry V, whose presence seemed to watch over this part of the Abbey, about ensuring these traditions remain meaningful in a changing world. "Today's ceremony suggests we're succeeding in that goal." Charles studied the portrait, remembering the warrior king who had transformed medieval England through a combination of military genius and political vision. Henry V had understood that true leadership required more than inherited authority. It demanded the ability to inspire others to serve causes greater than themselves. The parallel to their current situation was not lost on either man. "The Order of the Bath works because it recognizes genuine achievement rather than social position," Charles replied thoughtfully. "Every person we honor today earned their knighthood through extraordinary service to others. That's what gives these ceremonies their power and relevance. They entered Jerusalem chamber to find the newly created knights engaged in animated conversation with existing members of the order. The formal atmosphere of the investiture had given way to something warmer and more personal, as men and women who had dedicated their lives to public service shared experiences and formed bonds that would last for years to come. Colonel Sarah Mitchell was deep in conversation with Admiral Sir James Morrison about the challenges of coordinating military and civilian efforts in disaster relief operations. Their discussion revealed the complex realities behind the simple citations that had been read during the ceremony. The split-second decisions, the bureaucratic obstacles, the personal sacrifices that had earned them their places in the order. Dame Margaret Harrison was sharing experiences with Dr. B. Elizabeth Chen about working in remote and dangerous locations, their conversation touching on everything from diplomatic protocol to medical ethics. Despite their different professional backgrounds, they had discovered common ground in their commitment to serving vulnerable populations around the world. William moved easily among the gathered knights, his years of experience in similar settings evident in his ability to engage each person in meaningful conversation about their work and achievements. Charles watched with pride as his son demonstrated the combination of genuine interest and informed questioning that marked the most effective members of the royal family. Your Royal Highness, Captain David Walsh addressed William. I wanted to thank you for your support of search and rescue operations through your foundation work. It makes a real difference to know that the royal family understands the importance of what we do. William's response revealed his genuine engagement with the issues facing military and civilian rescue services. The statistics only tell part of the story, don't they? Every successful rescue represents a family kept together, a future preserved. The ripple effects of your work extend far beyond what any official report can capture. Charles joined their conversation, adding his own perspective on the importance of maritime safety and rescue operations. As a former naval officer himself, he understood the unique challenges faced by those who served at sea, where quick thinking and absolute reliability could mean the difference between life and death. The informal reception allowed for conversations that would have been impossible during the formal ceremony. Dr. Ord Kwame Asante shared stories of his work fighting infectious diseases, describing the challenges of working in regions where basic medical infrastructure was limited or non-existent. His accounts were both inspiring and sobering, revealing the persistence and creativity required to succeed in such difficult circumstances. The most rewarding moments come when you see a community take ownership of their own health initiatives, Dr. Asante explained to a fascinated audience. Our role is to provide knowledge and resources, but lasting change only comes when local people become leaders in their own right. His words resonated with Charles's own philosophy about the role of the monarchy in modern society. The most effective leadership often involved empowering others to achieve their own potential rather than imposing solutions from above. The Order of the Bath succeeded because it recognized and celebrated people who had found ways to make positive differences in the world. Field Marshal Lord Richards approached Charles with a more serious concern about the future of military service in an era of changing warfare and evolving threats. Their conversation touched on the challenges of maintaining traditional military virtues while adapting to new forms of conflict that might involve cyber warfare, terrorism, and humanitarian crises rather than conventional battlefield operations. The core principles remain the same, Charles observed: courage, dedication, and service to something greater than oneself. The specific challenges may evolve, but the character required to meet them is unchanged. Their discussion revealed the deep thinking about military ethics and leadership that had marked Charles's own service career. Despite never seeing combat himself, he had developed a profound understanding of the moral complexities faced by those who did serve in dangerous situations, and his perspectives were valued by professional military officers who respected his genuine commitment to their welfare. William joined their conversation, bringing his own insights from his service as a search and rescue pilot. His experiences had given him first-hand knowledge of the split-second decision-making and absolute reliability required in life-or-death situations, perspectives that added practical weight to more theoretical discussions about military ethics and leadership. The conversation gradually expanded to include other members of the Order, creating an informal seminar on leadership, service, and the challenges facing public institutions in the 21st century. The participants represented a cross-section of the Commonwealth's most dedicated public servants, and their perspectives revealed both the continuity and evolution of the values that had always motivated the best aspects of public service. Dr. Chen raised questions about the responsibility of privileged institutions to address global inequalities, particularly in healthcare and education. Her work in tropical medicine had brought her face-to-face with the reality that geographic accident of birth could determine whether someone had access to life-saving treatments or was condemned to suffer from preventable diseases. The Order of the Bath gives us a platform to advocate for those who don't have voices in traditional power structures, she suggested. Our honors carry with them the responsibility to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. Her words sparked a broader discussion about the political role of non-political institutions like the Order. While members were careful to avoid partisan positions, there was broad agreement that their positions gave them both the opportunity and responsibility to advocate for universal values like human dignity, justice, and compassion. Dame Margaret Harrison shared insights from her diplomatic career about the importance of maintaining international cooperation, even in times of political tension. Her experiences had taught her that personal relationships and shared commitments to common values could often overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable at the political level. The Commonwealth represents something unique in international relations, she observed. It's not based on geographical proximity or economic interest, but on shared values and historical connections that have evolved into genuine partnerships. Charles and William both contributed to this discussion, sharing their own perspectives on the role of the Commonwealth in promoting international understanding and cooperation. The Order of the Bath, with its inclusion of members from across the Commonwealth, served as a microcosm of these broader relationships. As the afternoon progressed, the conversations became increasingly personal, as the new knights shared reflections on what their honors meant to them. For many, the recognition was less important than the opportunity to join a community of people who shared their commitment to service and excellence. Captain Walsh spoke movingly about the responsibility he felt to represent all the men and women who served in search and rescue operations around the world. This honor belongs not just to me, but to every crew member who has risked their life to save someone they've never met, he said. We accept these recognitions on behalf of all those who serve without recognition or reward. His words captured something essential about the Order of the Bath. It succeeded because it honored people who were motivated by service rather than recognition, who would have continued their work regardless of whether it was ever acknowledged publicly. The Order provided a way for society to celebrate its best values, while inspiring others to similar service. As the reception drew toward its close, Charles felt a profound sense of satisfaction and renewal. The ceremony and the conversations that followed had reminded him of why institutions like the Order of the Bath mattered, and how they could continue to inspire excellence and service in future generations. The monarchy's role as guardian of these traditions was not mere pageantry, but an essential function in preserving the values that defined the character of the nation and the Commonwealth. The late afternoon sun streamed through the medieval windows of Jerusalem Chamber as the reception for the Order of the Bath gradually drew to its close. King Charles and Prince William stood together near the ancient fireplace, watching as the newly created knights exchanged contact information and made plans for future collaborations. The informal networking that followed such ceremonies often proved as valuable as the formal recognition itself, creating bonds that would enhance their effectiveness in serving the public good for years to come. Charles felt a deep sense of completion as he watched these dedicated public servants preparing to return to their various duties around the world. Each would carry with them not just the honor of membership in the Order, but the renewed sense of purpose that came from being recognized by their peers and their sovereign. The ceremony had served its ancient purpose of binding together those who served the crown and country in a fellowship of shared values and common commitment. Father, William said quietly, I've been thinking about our conversation this morning regarding the future of ceremonies like this one. Watching today's proceedings, I'm more convinced than ever that we're on the right path. Charles nodded, understanding the depth of reflection that his son's comment represented. The challenges facing the monarchy in the 21st century were real and significant. But ceremonies like the Order of the Bath demonstrated the institution's continued relevance and ability to inspire excellence in public service. The key was ensuring that these traditions evolved thoughtfully while maintaining their essential character and purpose. The Dean of Westminster approached them with the diplomatic timing that marked his long experience with royal ceremonies. Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, the knights have expressed their gratitude for the honor of this day. I believe they are ready to conclude the formal proceedings whenever you deem appropriate. Charles appreciated the Dean's careful management of the ceremony's rhythm and timing. These ancient rituals required a delicate balance between reverence for tradition and sensitivity to contemporary expectations. Too much formality could make the proceedings feel outdated and irrelevant, while too much casualness could diminish the significance of the honors being bestowed. As the formal reception concluded, Charles and William took time to speak individually with each of the newly created knights. These personal conversations were perhaps the most meaningful part of the entire day. allowing for exchanges that went far beyond the formal language of citations and ceremonies. Dr. Elizabeth Chen shared with Charles her plans for expanding medical research programs in regions affected by climate change, where shifting weather patterns were creating new challenges for public health. Her work represented exactly the kind of forward-thinking service that the Order of the Bath was designed to recognize and encourage. The traditional boundaries between disciplines are breaking down, she explained. Effective medical work now requires understanding of environmental science, international relations, and social policy. The challenges we face are too complex for any single approach to solve. Charles found her interdisciplinary perspective particularly compelling, as it reflected his own belief that the challenges of the modern world required collaborative approaches that transcended traditional institutional boundaries. The Order of the Bath, with its inclusion of members from diverse professional backgrounds, could serve as a model for such collaboration. Captain David Walsh discussed with William the evolution of search and rescue operations in an era of climate change and increasing maritime traffic. His insights revealed the complex interplay between technological advancement and traditional seamanship skills that characterized modern naval operations. The fundamentals remain the same, Captain Walsh observed. Quick thinking, absolute reliability, and willingness to risk your own safety for others. But the tools and techniques we use are constantly evolving. Success requires continuous learning and adaptation. William's own experience as a search and rescue pilot gave him unique appreciation for Captain Walsh's perspectives. Their conversation revealed the deep mutual respect that existed between professional service members, regardless of rank or social position. The Order of the Bath succeeded because it recognized this fundamental equality among those who served. Field Marshal Lord Richards approached both Charles and William with observations about the changing nature of international security and the role of military forces in maintaining peace and stability. His decades of experience in conflicts around the world had given him unique insights into the challenges facing democratic societies in an era of asymmetric warfare and global terrorism. The military's role is evolving beyond traditional concepts of national defense, he explained. We are increasingly called upon to provide humanitarian assistance, peacekeeping support, and disaster relief. These missions require the same courage and dedication as conventional warfare, but they also demand skills in diplomacy, cultural sensitivity, and international cooperation. His observations resonated with both Charles and William's understanding of how institutions needed to adapt to remain relevant while preserving their essential character. The military, like the monarchy, faced the challenge of maintaining traditional values while meeting contemporary expectations and requirements. Dame Margaret Harrison shared with them her insights about the future of diplomatic service in an increasingly connected but polarized world. Her career had spanned the end of the Cold War, the rise of global terrorism, and the emergence of new forms of international cooperation and conflict. The fundamental skills of diplomacy remain unchanged, she reflected. Understanding other cultures, building personal relationships, finding common ground even in the midst of disagreement. But the speed and complexity of modern communications have transformed how we practice these ancient arts. Her perspectives highlighted the continuity between traditional diplomatic virtues and contemporary challenges, much like the Order of the Bath itself bridged ancient traditions and modern service. The ceremony they had just completed demonstrated that some values and institutions could indeed adapt successfully to changing circumstances while maintaining their essential character. As the individual conversations concluded, Charles and William found themselves alone in Jerusalem Chamber for a few moments of private reflection. The ancient room, with its association with centuries of English history, provided the perfect setting for contemplating the day's significance and its implications for the future. Today has reinforced my conviction that we're doing something genuinely important, Charles said, settling into one of the chamber's historic chairs. These aren't just ceremonial honors, but recognition of the kinds of service and sacrifice that make civilization possible. William joined his father, both men still wearing their ceremonial robes, but with the formal atmosphere of the day giving way to more personal reflection. What struck me most was the humility of everyone we honored today. They see their knighthoods not as personal achievements, but as recognition of the teams and communities they represent. This observation captured something essential about the Order of the Bath's continued relevance. Unlike honors that might be seen as rewards for personal achievement or social advancement, the Order consistently attracted people who were motivated by service to others rather than personal recognition. This self-selection process helped ensure that the Order maintained its reputation for honoring genuine excellence and dedication. Their conversation turned to the broader challenges facing the monarchy and how ceremonies, like the Order of the Bath, contributed to the institution's evolution and adaptation. Both men understood that the monarchy's survival and relevance depended on its ability to embody values that transcended political divisions and social changes. The order works because it's genuinely meritocratic, William observed. People can't buy their way in or inherit membership. They have to earn it through exceptional service to others. That's what gives these ceremonies their moral authority. Charles agreed, reflecting on how the Order of the Bath differed from other honors that might be influenced by political considerations or social connections. The Order's focus on measurable achievement in service to others provided a clear standard that helped maintain public confidence in the integrity of the honors system. As they prepared to leave Westminster Abbey, both men took a final look around Jerusalem Chamber, acknowledging the historic significance of the day's events. The ceremony they had just completed would be remembered not just as another royal occasion, but as a moment when the monarchy had successfully demonstrated its continued relevance and ability to inspire excellence in public service. The journey back to Buckingham Palace provided an opportunity for further reflection on the day's significance. The crowds that had gathered to watch their arrival had largely dispersed, but the impact of the ceremony would continue to resonate through the lives and careers of those who had been honored and those who had witnessed their recognition. Charles found himself thinking about his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and how she would have viewed the day's proceedings. She had always understood that the monarchy's true strength lay not in its privileges, but in its ability to recognize and celebrate the best aspects of human service and dedication. The Order of the Bath perfectly embodied this principle. "I think we can be proud of what we accomplished today," Charles said as their car approached the palace gates. "We've honored exceptional service, strengthened the bonds between the crown and those who serve it, and demonstrated the continued relevance of institutions that celebrate service above self-interest." William nodded, already thinking about how the lessons of the day would inform his own approach to royal duties and responsibilities. The Order of the Bath had provided a master class in effective leadership, showing how recognition and encouragement could inspire continued excellence in service to others. As they entered Buckingham Palace, both men carried with them renewed confidence in the monarchy's ability to adapt and evolve while maintaining its essential character and purpose. The Order of the Bath had demonstrated that ancient traditions could indeed remain relevant and meaningful when they were grounded in genuine values and applied to recognize authentic achievement. The day's events would be recorded in the official chronicles of the Order and the Court Circular, but their true significance lay in the inspiration they provided to current and future servants of the Crown and country. The ceremony had successfully bridged past and future, honoring tradition while encouraging continued excellence in service to the common good. As the sun set over London, casting long shadows across the palace gardens, both Charles and William understood that they had participated in something far more significant than a ceremonial obligation. They had helped preserve and transmit values that would continue to inspire service and sacrifice long after the day's participants had passed into history. The Order of the Bath would continue, carrying forward its ancient mission of recognizing and encouraging the highest forms of human service, binding together each generation in the timeless commitment to serve something greater than themselves.